Okay, so as you could probably tell from the title or the thumbnail of the video, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword released 10 years ago today. And honestly, that's pretty crazy and a pretty big milestone. For as long as I can remember, I've been a big fan of the Legend of Zelda franchise, and honestly, Skyward Sword was always one of those games that I always wanted to give a shot. However, when I first got my hands on it, I had a completely different experience than I would have ever thought I would have had. Skyward Sword was a game on the Wii that I always wanted to play for the sole reason of visually I really loved the way it looked. I wasn't a big fan of the mechanics or anything like that, but looking at this game always put a smile on my face. However, as I think many of you should already know, visuals should not be the only reason you buy a game. No matter how great a game looks, the game could still be very crap. And I'm not saying Skyward Sword is crap by any means, it was just a game I was not interested in the slightest, despite its visuals. However, at around 10 years old, this was a concept I really didn't understand. I wanted the game just solely for the way it looked, and honestly, that kinda says a lot because the game was $60 and as a pre-owned copy. I think what sucked a lot about trying to get this game is, it was really hard to find, and when you did find it, it was extremely expensive, and that's kinda how Wii games are because scalpers love to just hype the price up for everything. Anyway, I did end up getting the game, and I actually did enjoy from what I played of it. However, I didn't play a whole lot of it because I just wasn't that great at the game, and I still wasn't feeling the motion controls. I think the farthest I ever got in that game initially was the first 3 temples. I got that far and decided that the motion controls were a bit too much, and I still didn't want anything to do with it. From that point forward, I always chalked up Skyward Sword as a mediocre entry in a phenomenal franchise. The funniest thing about this is, it wasn't just me who felt this way. There were a plethora of people out there who also felt the same way because of the motion controls or the visuals themselves or any other reason, which is kind of funny because the visuals was actually the one thing I really loved about the game, so it's really interesting to see a difference of opinion there. Needless to say, I never went back to actually play and finish Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword until maybe about 10 years later when the re-release or remaster happened. Also, I think now would probably be the best time to mention that throughout the video, I'm going to be showing gameplay from The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD as opposed to the original release. And that's only because I don't like recording games on the Wii, and I also don't even have the game anymore for the Wii, so that kind of says it all right there. Anyway, when the remaster was first announced, I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted to see something like an Ocarina of Time remaster for the Switch. I know we had it on 3DS before, but this was a game that I really wanted to play again. And also, I really already wasn't a huge fan of Skyward Sword, but I was still open to giving it another shot. And honestly, I am so thankful that I did. Skyward Sword is probably one of my favorite Zelda games. Everything about this game, from the characters, the music, and also the visual presentation itself, just stuck out to me, and I loved it even more for it. But you know, the funny thing is, I still can't honestly tell you that I would have finished this game if motion controls were still a requirement. You see, I have access to a Pro Controller, so I was able to use the right analog stick to do all of the sword motions. At first, I thought this was a very clunky idea and still probably wouldn't even end up working, but for some reason it does and it feels so natural. Honestly, I don't even think I'd be opposed if future Zelda games allowed this type of maneuvering with the sword. Being able to control it with the analog stick just feels so right for some reason. Trust me, I am well aware that the motion control was supposed to enable some type of extra, I guess, immersion tactic that the Wii offered, but even still, it just felt clunky to me. It may not feel clunky to you, but hey, that's just how I always saw it. The motion controller, however, offers up the kind of the same appeal, but on a lesser extent, and I think that's why I like it so much. This certainly isn't a necessity for newer Zelda games, as it's something that I don't even think is a necessity for this one, but I think it's definitely a direction they could possibly go into, and one that I think that I would overwhelmingly be pleased with. But you know what, since I'm on the topic, I might as well go into another area of this game that I initially was not interested in at all, but after the remaster happened, I really gained an attraction to it, and that happens to be the Loftwing. Now, let's not get it twisted. I always thought that the Loftwing was a good idea. I always think that some method of transportation is always necessary in video games, and the Loftwing is a very interesting yet wonderful idea. But it always just kind of was really off-putting because of the controls, and also the sky was just very bare bones to me. Every time I would fly the Loftwing, I always felt like I was just aimlessly going to my destination as some sort of enemy out of nowhere would throw something at me, but even still, it wasn't that hard to dodge. There wasn't a whole lot of obstacles in my path, or really any destinations to look forward to going to in the meantime. Now, of course, that doesn't make it bad, but I would say that over time, this mechanic did actually end up really growing on me. Like most Zelda games, the further you progress in the game, the more you are able to do. So the Loftwing is no exception to that. You're able to do all sorts of tricks and go faster in the air to reach your destination at a faster time. It's nice, but it's not like anything world-shattering or anything. To be totally honest, this game would be a lot more fun if you could just fast travel right off the jump, especially with this remaster happening. You figure that would have just been a thing implemented in the game, but of course they have it behind a paywall for an amiibo for $20. And that's kind of ridiculous, and ain't nobody got time for that. Alright, so I believe the last really relatively new mechanic that Skyward Sword added was a stamina meter, and that meant that Link could finally run in his games. If you've played other games like The Legend of the Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, any of those games really, you'll know that Link doesn't even really run in those games, unless you have like the Pegasus boots or something like that. But anyway, the majority of the time in the games, Link is doing a whole lot of rolling. Now, of course, you can still roll in Skyward Sword, but unlike the other games before it, this one actually takes up a large chunk of the stamina meter. And because of that, I would probably argue that it's one of the lesser efficient ways of transport. I prefer just running if you're going to roll anyway. Alright, so with all of the big new stuff out of the way, let's get into the story itself. Alright, so let's kind of make this pretty quick. Skyward Sword is the first game of the entire Zelda franchise. Well, not the first one made, but the first one in the actual story. This is basically the game to play if you want to know about Link's origin story, pretty much how Hyrule came to be. But anyway, the story actually begins before Link is even a thought. You see, the goddess of Hylia was giving a wish-granting power known as the Triforce, and this other guy known as the Demon King Demise, he was trying to find it and take over the world pretty much. Demise was a very powerful deity who had basically laid waste to the entire land himself, but the goddess Hylia gathered all of her survivors, sent them to the sky, and was able to take care of Demise for a long period of time. So that would explain why everyone is in the sky for the beginning of the game. And also, it's kind of funny because everyone who lives on the Sky World, or Skyloft rather, believes that the entire surface below the clouds is a complete and utter myth. It makes sense though because everyone just is accustomed to knowing what's only above the sky, and they've only heard the surface land in legends and urban tales. Several years passed and we are finally met with Link, the main character, who passes this Loftwing final exam and is able to fly with Zelda alone in the sky. This was a very peaceful time until a dark tornado hits and Zelda is whisked away to the surface. Link later meets up with Fi, this sword who's inside of this Hylian temple, and he is able to talk to Fi and finally figure out what the surface world holds and how he can get there. It is later revealed that Link is the chosen hero who is going to rescue Princess Zelda from the surface world and save her from all of the bad guys in it. That's pretty much the very bare bones and dry version of the plot. You see, you have characters like Ghirahim, Groose, and many others who I have yet to touch on. So, I guess, why not spend a bit time talking about them in very brief, so as not to give off any spoilers. Alright, so firstly let's talk about Groose. Now, he's actually a really funny character in the series because he actually is a character you probably don't like at the very beginning of the game. He's the main, I guess, antagonist for the time being because he's the only problem that Link seems to have in his entire life. He does a lot of mean stuff to Link at the very beginning of the game, and because of it, Link doesn't really think too highly of him, or at least I think he doesn't because this character just doesn't talk. But I mean, he's not one of those characters who's just unlikable for no reason. There's a reason behind it. You see, he actually has a big crush on Princess Zelda, and he thinks that Link is the only one prohibiting him from being with her, which is just not the case. Unironically though, this character actually becomes a fan favorite by many, and also a fan favorite by myself too by the end of the game. He actually ends up being a really nice guy, and I think you should play it through just to see what happens with him. Funny thing is too, Nintendo knows how much we like Groose because they even have the nerve to do a bunch of fan cams with him on their YouTube channel. It's kind of weird, but also kind of enjoyable. Okay, so the next character is known as Ghirahim. Now, he is probably the oddest character in the Zelda series. From the moment you meet this character, you know he's going to be an antagonist just by his music, and to be honest, it's some pretty insane and good music. Now, I did mention that he is kind of somewhat a creepy character just by the way he holds himself and acts in front of Link alone, but he's also very creepy because he's one of the only characters, I believe, in the entire game that is able to predict your movements. Every time I fought Ghirahim in this game, I always thought I was up for an actual challenge. You know, he made me think more than any other boss fight I'd ever had to do in this game before. Even on the first boss, I had to say, I was very confused. Nevertheless though, he is a very fun boss fight, and honestly I have to say, this boss fight is probably in my top favorites with the Legend of Zelda series, and I'm talking about the final boss with Ghirahim. That is insane and very, very fun. Oh, and by the way, Ghirahim actually spends a lot of time trying to resurrect Demise throughout the entirety of the game. The other character I really want to talk about here, that I really don't know if I should because it goes into a lot of spoiler territory, is Impa. Impa is one of those characters who plays a huge role in the development of the entire story, and honestly, I really don't know how much I can talk about without actually spoiling it, so I guess that's all I'm really gonna say. Except for the fact that this is a top tier Impa design, and the only one that's better is the one in Hyrule Warriors. But anyway, with that aside, let's move on to talk about one of my favorite moments from the entire game. Honestly, this moment is highly underrated, and I really wish I could play it again just right off the jump, but I really don't feel like playing the entire game again just to replay that one moment, so I'll be showing off some gameplay from other people playing the game. But even still, the one moment I'm talking about is that one part where Link loses all of his equipment. There's this whole section of the game where you end up actually getting caught by bokoblins, and your only job is to rescue all of the equipment that is scattered throughout. You know, everything's being guarded by bokoblins, and if you get caught, you start over from ground zero. It's super, super fun, and honestly, it's very, very tense. What makes this so good is, number one, this really isn't done in a whole lot of Zelda games I've ever played before. If there's any others that do this, let me know in the comment section down below, I'd love to give them a shot. But either way, we're taught throughout the entirety of this game to use all of our items to our advantage and take out as many bokoblins as we possibly can. However, this is one of those situations where you have to see how much you're worth without everything you already have. It's really cool. But anyway, speaking of tense moments throughout Skyward Sword, there is one in particular that I think I should bring up, and that's the Silent Realms. I'm not sure if anyone else had some sort of, anxiety when playing these levels, but oh my gosh. Playing these, I was always feeling like someone was just creeping over my shoulder, watching me do this, and I was just terrified at the same time. For those of you who don't know, whenever you're in the Silent Realm, you are required to fill up this thing called your Spirit Vessel, and once you fill it all the way up, you are able to leave. However, there's a bit of a catch. Once you leave that little circle you start off in, the protectors of the spirit realm known as the Guardians Watchers will begin to chase you to no end. Of course, unless you get another tier. Once you get a tier, you get another free 90 seconds of looking for another one. However, if those 90 seconds run up, they'll begin chasing you yet again. And if they catch you, you start the entire mode all over again. I thought this was fun, but at the same time, extremely nerve-wracking. The last thing I really want to spend time talking about here is the final boss, and this shouldn't be too revealing in terms of spoilers, but the final boss is Demise. Now Link will fight him, and it honestly is super climactic. Now this battle with Demise starts off with you knowing full and well that once you go in that little portal thing, you're stuck in that location and only one will come out. It's a cage fight. Pretty much, it's a cage fight. So it's Link versus Demise, and whoever wins this fight will be able to go back to Hyrule, but whoever fails is stuck there for all eternity. So the setup for the fight is honestly truly amazing, but the fight could honestly stand alone. Now this fight is just straight up sword to sword combat and thinking before Demise can, with you're using lightning strikes and also just sword positioning. It's a really amazing tactic, and honestly, it really relies heavily on how well you are at using the motion controls or the analog stick. This for sure was definitely a top 3 boss fight in this entire game, although I still do believe that Koloktos is my number 1. But anyway, as for a final verdict, this game is honestly a must play. It's a Zelda game that I think would really be good in introducing newer fans, and also it's one that's really fun to play even if you're an old Zelda fan. In all honesty, the only reason I ever got into the game in the first place when it was on the Wii was because of the motion controls, and now that's not an issue, and I really ended up enjoying it. I definitely recommend you play this if you haven't had the chance to yet. It's not my favorite Zelda game, but I have to say I really enjoyed it. What's going on, guys? Thank you all so much for watching to the end of the video. Now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. It's not my favorite Zelda game, but it's one I had a lot of fun with. Anyway, before I go here, I want to turn the tables and thank my amazing channel members. Thank you all so much for continuing to support me and my content. You guys are truly the best motivators. Every day I wake up praising the Lord because I have people like you who want to keep continuing to inspire me to create the best content that I can possibly create. You guys are truly the best, no doubt about it. If you're interested in becoming a member of my channel, there will be more information in the link in the description down below. But anyway, with all that being said and done, thank you all so much for watching. This is Sonic signing out. Have a super blessed day, y'all.
Why are you playing that trash?